This podcast is brought to you by India Knowledge at Wharton. Please visit knowledge.wharton.upenn.edu/India for more information.
In April, when Makarand Teje became CEO of AppLabs, the world's largest independent testing and quality management firm, his priorities were clear. He wanted to strengthen client relationships in the U.S. and Europe. Teje also wanted to find ways to increase revenues from $67 million to $100 million. In a slowing global economy, what strategies will AppLabs adopt to reach its ambitious goals? Teje discussed that question and more in an interview with India Knowledge at Wharton.
Our guest today is Makarand Teje, CEO of AppLabs. Mac, thank you so much for joining us today.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you, Mukul.
It's been about 2 months since you took over as CEO of AppLabs. What were your priorities for your first 100 days?
That's a great question. My earlier getting on board as a Chief Operating Officer gave me a good understanding as to how are we really doing as a global business. But after 1st April, when I took over as a CEO, the clear priorities were to further strengthen our client engagements that we have in our US business as well as Europe business, and continue to look for opportunities in terms of our operations area where we can really look for improvement in our margin.
What are your overall priorities for AppLabs?
Our journey has been really exciting, and over the last 7 years now, we are the largest independent testing services company in the world. And we started serving the independent software vendors. What we are finding really interesting over the last 2 years is that the services that we are providing for the software vendors are now more than valuable to the enterprise customers. And to talk a little bit about enterprise customers, insurance companies, airlines companies, utilities companies, manufacturing, and logistics. And the very reason for that is software today is so much intertwined with every business process. And it would be fair to say that it is more complex than ever 5 years back, and it is going to get increasingly complex. So real key issue from a CIO perspective is that when we look at the full life cycle development of a software, are we really adequately budgeting time? Are we really allocating money for the testing of the activity? Because successful testing is what really results in terms of successful release of the product.
How does AppLabs' scale of operations compare with some of your Indian and American competitors?
AppLabs today has about 2,000 employees, and we are in US, Europe, as well as India. And we serve about 80 plus customers globally. And nature of these engagements are more year on year, so they are doing some projects, but more engagements are based on annual engagements where we really do ongoing work with the clients. In terms of the capability that we have really built, it's more of 360 degrees capability in the testing services areas alone. And to illustrate, we do certification, we do performance testing, we do manual automation testing, as well as we have also launched a new service of advisory practice around test process consulting. And short of that, for a CIO, defining a blueprint in terms of how should my test process really look like across the organization, bring us in, we'll be able to define, but not only define, help you really implement that.
You referred to AppLabs as the largest independent testing company. Is there a value to being independent, or is it better to be part of a larger IT company that does both testing and development?
Increasingly what we find is that the skill of testing is present in a developer, but the independent view what a tester really looks at it from objectively and is really looking at in an unbiased way. And that's really helping organizations to bring us in, irrespective whether they have an internal organizations doing development or they have another service provider who is really doing development. And that value of looking at a code in an unbiased way is where we really add value. The second one, if you look at a full service organization, the way the hiring, the talent management, and the entire supply chain works, it is geared to really bring in all sorts of skills. Whereas AppLabs is fully focused on building career for testers and bringing career test professionals. And I love to say that this is the only place in the world where testers walk with pride.
In 2007, AppLabs had $67 million in revenues, and you had set a goal to reach $100 million. How far along are you towards reaching that target?
We are 07, 08, we were right on track in terms of really going to our goal of $100 million. We are tracking well above the industry average of about 30% is what general services industry is growing out of India. And as a niche provider, we are experiencing much higher growth. And there are a couple of components we are really helping drive this growth is that looking at the clients that we have really acquired and representing them, if I were to say, the entire service portfolio, and asking them a business question that testing is a technical skill, but how will it really solve a business issue? And one of the service portfolio which we have is a performance testing today is a very good service that is helping businesses to really pose that performance of whether it is web applications or enterprise applications has become a more business issue today rather than a technical issue. So that's really helping us. The second area is we have strengthened our investments in terms of the client management. So we have a client management team that is focused in US and Europe, which brings a very good cultural proximity to the customer in terms of how do they engage, what they would like to really see. So we kind of built in that initial comfort when we start engagements. So they have an advantage of somebody who they are comfortable with interacting with, as well as they have an advantage of a global delivery that we really bring alongside. And that will really help us fuel our growth. In terms of organic piece, we are also very targeted going after certain industries for acquiring new customers. And insurance, manufacturing, retail, and energy are some of the ones which really come top of the charts in terms of where we are really going after.
In terms of your revenue goals for the next 2 or 3 years, what strategy are you using to get there?
You know, what we expect is that the current traction which we have in terms of percentage growth of above 45% will continue. And I would say for past were to speak of something, last 4 years we had about 72% compound annual growth rate. And going forward, we expect to grow at least 40% plus year on year. Organic acquisition of new clients and servicing our existing clients in the service portfolio, what we have is going to be measured. But there is a good possibility of even adding some inorganic piece as well.
A number of Indian companies have been growing through acquisitions. Are there any gaps in your strategic portfolio which you think will be filled by acquisitions? If so, what do you think you might do in that respect?
Mukul, we have done very well with acquisitions, and we acquired a company called Key Labs here in Linden, Utah, which really helped us to bring a lab on site here and help us build the certification business. About a year and a half back, we also completed another acquisition of a company called IS Integration, which is based out of UK. And this company brought us skills in the consulting area and more important in the system integration testing area. So our outlook in terms of going forward is that anything that will help us further enhance our value proposition as the overall testing service provider is something which will be attractive.
Speaking of consulting, one of the biggest challenges Indian companies have faced is building relationships with Fortune 500 companies, especially at the C-suite level. In fact, even large Indian IT companies face this challenge. How are you addressing it?
You know, our chat, we recognize the challenge, and what we are really taken is a selected approach. And it's the clients whom we have already relationship with, we have really putting additional investments because they know us and we've been working with them for 5 years, 6 years. So it is relatively easier for us to really go to the C-level executives and explain as to what we are really doing. As well as the team that we are really building in terms of acquiring new clients, we are really looking at senior experienced professionals who really bring the understanding of the global culture, and that understanding becomes important. It is the whole cultural context as well as ability to have dealt with multiple time zones before and really translate those benefits in terms of clients as to what will mean for them. And all this keeping testing in mind.
As you go about trying to get these clients, whom do you come up against as competitors, and how do you position yourself?
You know, competition is coming from multiple areas as to we do compete with the large global SIs like the Accenture, IBM. We do compete with the tier 1 Indian providers like Infosys and Wipro. And our positioning is that the independence of the testing and the focus that we really bring it to testing is what is allowing us to first getting invited to the large deals, and second, really communicating that there is something special. Because if you really look at from a CIO perspective, that if they are looking for partnership in general IT services areas, they get to hear more or less similar message. But when we tell that if it is testing, we'll do it for you. If it is something else, we would rather pass. And that kind of gives them further assurance that here is a company that is entirely focused on testing and wants to really stay focused on testing. And that's one of the ways to really win early confidence of them in the larger engagements where we come across the broad competition. That's the global SIs as well as the Indian majors.
Even if you do succeed in winning confidence, the US economic situation is so uncertain. There's no telling when the recovery will begin. How is this affecting the decisions big companies are willing to make about large IT projects?
AppLabs' perspective about our revenue base between US and Europe is about 50-50. And what we are finding is that our sectoral preference within the industries that we are targeting, which is insurance, utilities, and manufacturing, is really helping us going after the new client acquisition. What we are certainly seeing is that decisions taking longer and probably a longer due diligence. But the fundamental value proposition of whether it is global sourcing or trying to find out the best of the breed in terms of IT services or take cost out or improve quality or improve cycle time, that's not really changed. So we just see that as a temporary phenomena for a couple of quarters, and we should be seeing that whether it is the new client acquisition as well as the client growth that we already have should exceed in terms of what we expect.
Are some verticals being affected more than others?
Clearly, it is the retail banking, and I would say that the mortgage and the retail banking. Fortunately, we did not have much exposure in terms of our current client base, but there is sort of a ripple effect, what you see in the other industries as well. With our association of banking financial services customer, we also build a very strong capability now in the exchanges. And what we find is that if you take financial exchanges as the first level platform and all the other exchanges, which is either commodities, derivatives, and metals, and so on and so forth, the type of testing skill that needs a combination of a strong business understanding of how exchange work and what kind of repeatable tools that you need to really bring to make sure that any of the newer releases that they are bringing in are defect-free. But more important than that is that to continue to manage defect-free, they need a very strong program in terms of independent testing. So we recently acquired in last 4 quarters a couple of exchanges, and we are their sole partner in terms of testing. One good example is a Turquoise, which is a platform which is set up in UK by about 11 investment banks, and they are going to create an alternative platform for the large exchanges, and we are their chosen partner for testing right now.
AppLabs has a significant operation in Hyderabad, India. To what degree is the appreciation of the rupee still a problem for AppLabs?
I would say in general about 6 quarters back, it kind of posed as an important thing to really look at for overall IT services industry. And when we looked at AppLabs, that is something we recognized early, and some of the initiatives that we really took in terms of continued focus on gaining client confidence in terms of the model is right. Second, looking at operations, looking at our utilization, carefully looking at our bench. More important, really using that time to create capability for people who are on bench in terms of industries that I mentioned in, which is exchanges and insurance. And second, the investment in terms of building soft skills has really helped us. And now operationally, we have a model by which we would say that irrespective of what will happen to dollar and rupee, operationally we are able to take that and manage the expectations of our customer as well as deliver the robust business growth that is expected out of business. So it is the time about over 6 quarters has really helped us to deal with any variation that will happen in dollar to rupee.
The other refrain I constantly keep hearing, especially from Indian companies, is how hard it is to keep good people. The rate of attrition is terrible. How is AppLabs dealing with this problem?
If you look at a young worker today who is 20-something, the ideas and the type of environment that they need to perform and take is entirely different than the time when we grew up. And the interesting part is that Our whole human resource approach is based on first taking testing as an attraction and creating as a career piece for the professionals who want to really get in, and then creating a sort of a social network within a company, which includes the quarterly meetings, the time they get out with their supervisors, the program that they really sign up in terms of their personal as well as professional environment. All that is really helping us to build a sort of a solid community. We've been able to effectively do that across the 3 buildings that we have, and that is because of deploying these similar human resource processes which we have, which is related to the training, mentoring, as well as the strong technical training that we provide in terms of testing. So broadly, we expect a much lower attrition compared to what we are seeing in the broader industry. And to give you an idea that Hyderabad, if I were to talk in general, about 20 to 22% attrition would be observed and reported. We're running at about 18% attrition right now.
What keeps you up at night?
Well, the excitement that, first of all, we're the largest independent testing company, and from the early success that we have serving the enterprise customers, there's a lot we could do, whether you look at the US market as well as the Europe market. So we've just seen the tip of iceberg right now.
Where would you like AppLabs to be in the next 4 to 5 years?
Where we'll find the value proposition of AppLabs will get much stronger in terms of acquiring capability in the business critical applications, in which testing will become so much mainstream that whenever you look at the outcome of a business system, you could relate it to directly as to what went right and what did not go right in a particular testing. So some of the investments that we are really making in building the industry capability will really help us get there in a 5-year time frame. But model is here to stay. It's going to get stronger and probably much wider in terms of acceptance. For somebody to say that we would rather look at testing areas done by independent players and specialized players who have really built their entire model right from training, recruitment, as well as servicing customer based on focus.
Mak, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Mukul.
For more information, please visit knowledge.wharton.upenn.edu/India.